Captain Rax had served the Galactic Coalition for 37 cycles, witnessed the rise and fall of 3 empires, and survived battles that claimed entire fleets. Yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. Watching his sister ship's distress beacon fade into the void while the nearest rescue vessel was still days away. The Harmony's Edge had suffered catastrophic engine failure in the neutral buffer zone, that empty stretch of space between Coalition territory and the forbidden human sectors. 200 souls aboard, including Ambassador Vale, who carried the peace accords that could end the brewing war with the hegemony. "Sir," his communications officer Nix looked up with barely concealed fear. "We've tried every frequency. No Coalition vessels within range." Rax stared at the tactical display, his 4 arms unconsciously clicking against his command chair, a nervous habit from his youth on Keltar Prime. The buffer zone stretched endlessly in all directions, except for one corridor that led directly into human space. The Treaty of Titan Station had been crystal clear. No non-human vessel was to enter human-controlled zones under any circumstances. The agreement, signed 53 years ago after humanity's shocking victory against the Vorthon Armada, had created an impenetrable barrier around human territory. No one knew what lay beyond those borders. Ships that accidentally crossed never returned. Official reports claimed technical malfunctions, but the whispers spoke of something far more sinister. "Captain," his tactical officer Kale spoke softly. "There is one option." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what Kale meant. Rax pulled up the navigation charts. The nearest human outpost, Station Echo 7, was only 6 hours away, well within range to mount a rescue operation. But crossing into human space meant violating the most sacred law in the Coalition Charter. "The humans won't even answer our hails," Nick said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "They never do." Rax had studied the humans during his academy years, fascinated by their rapid ascension from a primitive world to a galactic power in less than 2 centuries. They had appeared on the cosmic stage like a force of pure determination. Their ships crude, but effective. Their tactics unconventional, but devastatingly successful. The Battle of Centauri 7 had become legend. How a single human fleet had held off 3 Coalition armadas through sheer bloody-minded persistence. But that was history. Now humans were the galaxy's greatest mystery, sealed away behind their impenetrable borders, spoken of in hushed tones and fearful speculation. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Sarge's Tales Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "Sir?" Kale's voice cut through his thoughts. "The Harmony's Edge is reporting life support failure. They have maybe 12 hours. Rax closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command pressing down like gravity from a neutron star. 200 lives hung in the balance, including his own sister, who served as the ship's chief medical officer. The Coalition would court-martial him for violating the treaty. But if he did nothing, those people would die in the cold darkness of space. He opened his eyes and straightened in his chair. Plot a course for human space. Maximum speed. The bridge erupted in shocked murmurs, but his crew began working with practiced efficiency. They had followed him this far. They would follow him into the unknown. As the stars shifted on the view screen and they accelerated toward the human border, Rax wondered if he had just made the most courageous decision of his career, or the last mistake he would ever make. The moment they crossed the invisible line into human space, every system on the bridge began screaming warnings. Red lights bathed the command center as proximity alarms wailed, and Rax felt his heart skip several beats. "Multiple contacts," Kale shouted over the noise. 6 vessels, closing fast from 3 directions. On the main screen, ships materialized, from what had seemed like empty space. Sleek, angular vessels that moved with predatory grace. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, designed to blend with the void itself. These weren't the crude, bulky ships from the history texts. These were craft that spoke of decades of refinement and deadly purpose. "They're not responding to our distress calls," Nix reported, his voice tight with panic. "Standard frequency. Emergency channels, even the old diplomatic codes. Nothing." The human ships moved in perfect formation, surrounding the Coalition's pride like wolves circling wounded prey. Rax had never seen coordination like it, not even among the elite Keltar squadrons. It was as if the 6 vessels shared a single mind. "Sir, they're targeting our engines," Kale's voice cracked. "Weapon signatures are... I've never seen anything like this. The energy readings are off the charts." A new voice suddenly filled the bridge, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. It was distinctly human, that strange flat accent that somehow conveyed both warmth and menace. "Coalition vessel, you are in violation of the Treaty of Titan Station. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Rax stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite his fear. "This is Captain Rax of the Coalition ship Pride. We're on a rescue mission. The vessel Harmony's Edge is dying in the buffer zone. We request humanitarian assistance." Silence. The human ships maintained their formation, weapons still locked on target. Then, unexpectedly, the voice returned. "Captain Rax of Keltar Prime. Service record 37 cycles. Commendations for valor at the Siege of Markab. Survivor of the hegemony raids on the outer colonies." Rax's blood ran cold. How did they know his personal history? The Coalition's most classified databases shouldn't be accessible to human intelligence. "Your sister, Dr. Lynn Rax, serves aboard the Harmony's Edge as Chief Medical Officer. She has 2 younglings in the colony schools on Keltar Prime. How do you—" Rax began, but the human voice cut him off. "We know many things, Captain, including the fact that you're telling the truth about your rescue mission." One of the human ships broke formation, moving closer. Through the viewscreen, Rax could see details of its construction. Elegant curves married to aggressive angles, every line speaking of function and efficiency. Weapon ports dotted its hull like the eyes of some vast predator. "My name is Commander Stone," the human voice continued. "I'm going to ask you a question, Captain, and your answer will determine whether you leave human space intact or as scattered." Atoms. Rax's crew looked to him, terror and hope warring in their expressions. He straightened, drawing on every ounce of command presence he possessed. "Ask your question, Commander." "If we save your people, what happens when you return to Coalition? Space? Do you report our capabilities, our positions? Do you tell your superiors that humans showed mercy to those who violated our borders?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Rax realized he was at a crossroads that would define not just his own fate, but potentially the relationship between 2 galactic powers. "I would report that human forces assisted in a humanitarian rescue," he said carefully. "Nothing more. And your crew? Can you guarantee their silence about our military capabilities?" Rax looked around the bridge at faces he had served with for years. Nix, who had 3 mates and a dozen offspring waiting at home. Kale, whose precision had saved them countless times. These weren't just subordinates, they were family. "On my honor as a Keltar warrior and a Coalition officer, yes." Another pause. Then, impossibly, Rax heard something that chilled him more than any threat. The human was laughing. "Captain, you're either the bravest fool in the galaxy, or exactly the kind of leader we need to finally have this conversation." Commander Stone's ship docked with the Coalition's Pride with mechanical precision that spoke of technology far beyond anything in the Coalition fleet. When the airlock cycled open, Rax got his first look at a human in over 3 decades. Stone was smaller than expected. Most species towered over humans. But there was something in his bearing that commanded immediate respect. His uniform was simple, functional black with minimal insignia, and his face carried the weathered look of someone who had seen too much conflict. But it was his eyes that struck Rax most. Intelligent, calculating, and surprisingly kind. "Captain Rax." Stone extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for being honest with me. It's a rare quality in this galaxy." Rax clasped the offered hand, noting the firmness of Stone's grip. "Commander, my people are dying. If you can help them—" "Already handled," Stone interrupted, producing a small device that projected a holographic display. "My ships reached the Harmony's Edge 12 minutes ago. Full evacuation in progress. Your sister is coordinating the medical response. Quite competent, by the way." Relief flooded through Rax so intensely he nearly staggered. "They're safe?" "Safe, patched up, and being transferred to one of our medical frigates." Dr. Rax insisted on remaining with the most critical patients. Stone's expression softened slightly. She refused evacuation until every crew member was accounted for. Runs in the family, apparently. The tactical display showed the rescue operation in real time. Human ships moved with practiced efficiency, their rescue craft darting between the Harmony's edge's failing sections like schools of mechanical fish. Rax watched in amazement as they extracted survivors from compartments he would have thought inaccessible. Your technology, Rax said quietly. It's decades ahead of anything we have. Stone's smile was thin. Captain, what I'm about to show you stays between us. Are we clear? At Rax's nod, Stone activated another display. Star charts appeared, showing not just human space, but the entire galactic arm. Red markers indicated hegemony forces. Blue showed coalition positions, and green marked something else entirely. The Devourers, Stone said simply. They're coming. Rax felt his blood freeze. The Devourers were legend, nightmare stories used to frighten younglings, an ancient race that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. Impossible. They're myth, ancient history. They're real, they're active, and they're approximately 18 months out from the nearest coalition world. Stone manipulated the display, showing projected invasion routes. We've been tracking them for 7 years. Every deep space monitoring station, every long-range probe, all confirms the same thing. They're heading this way. The implications hit Rax like physical blows. The treaty, the isolation. You've been preparing. 53 years of preparation, Captain. While the coalition and hegemony have been posturing and politicking, we've been building, learning, adapting. Stone's voice carried a weight that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. The Treaty of Titan Station wasn't about keeping others out. It was about keeping us focused. New displays showed human military installations, research facilities, and fleets that dwarfed anything Rax had imagined. Shipyards that could construct vessels in a matter of weeks instead of years. Weapons that could crack planets. Defense networks that spanned entire systems. But why show me this? Why risk exposing your preparations? Stone turned to face him, directly. Because, Captain, your rescue mission just gave us something we've been waiting for. A coalition officer with honor, courage, and the ability to think beyond politics. Someone who might be able to convince your leaders that the old ways aren't going to save us from what's coming. Rax stared at the projections, his mind reeling. They'll never believe it. The Coalition Council thinks humans are barely above savages. They'll dismiss any warning as fear-mongering. Then we need to give them proof they can't ignore. Stone's expression was grim. And we need to do it soon. The Devourers don't negotiate, Captain. They don't take prisoners. They consume everything. In their path. And right now, that path leads straight through Coalition space. Through the view screen, Rax could see the final survivors being transferred from the Harmony's edge. His sister's ship was saved, but the conversation with Stone had revealed a threat that made their small crisis seem insignificant. What do you need me to do? Rax asked. For the first time since they'd met, Stone smiled with genuine warmth. Help us save the galaxy, Captain. Help us prove that when survival is at stake, old enemies can become the strongest allies. The journey back to Coalition space took 3 days, and Rax spent every waking hour studying the intelligence Stone had provided. The data was overwhelming. Star charts showing Devourer fleet movements, analysis of their consumption patterns, projected timelines that made his sleep fitful and brief. Dr. Lynn Rax had been transferred back to the Coalition's Pride along with the other survivors. Her medical expertise needed to treat the more seriously wounded. She found her brother in his quarters at the start of the second day, hunched over tactical displays with the hollow-eyed look of someone carrying impossible knowledge. You look terrible, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. When was the last time you slept? Lynn, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Rax looked up from the displays. What did you see aboard the human ships? His sister's expression grew thoughtful. Technology I've never encountered. Medical facilities that make our best hospitals look primitive. But that's not what impressed me most. What did? Their people. I worked alongside human medics for 6 hours, treating our wounded. They were compassionate, skilled, and completely professional. Nothing like the savages the Coalition briefings describe. She leaned forward. Rax, what aren't you telling me? He activated the privacy shield around his quarters and began sharing Stone's revelations. Lynn listened in growing horror as her brother outlined the Devourer threat, the human preparations, and the impossible task that lay ahead. 18 months, she whispered when he finished. The Coalition will never mobilize fast enough. It gets worse. I've been analyzing our fleet dispositions, our defensive positions, everything. Rax pulled up Coalition military assessments. We're not just unprepared. We're positioned exactly wrong. Our forces are concentrated along the hegemony border, expecting a conventional war. The communication system chimed, indicating they were approaching Coalition space. Soon, they would have to face questions about their violation of the treaty, their contact with human forces, and somehow convince the Council that their greatest enemies might be their only hope for survival. Sir, came Nix's voice over the intercom. We're receiving priority communications from High Command. Admiral Kane wants to speak with you immediately upon our arrival. Rax exchanged glances with his sister. Admiral Kane was old guard Coalition military, a veteran of the hegemony, conflicts who viewed humans as dangerous primitives to be contained. Convincing him would be like convincing a mountain to fly. There's something else, Lynn said quietly. While we were aboard their medical ship, I overheard conversations between the human crew. They speak of Earth, their homeworld, with such reverence, such protective love, and they spoke of their colonies the same way. These aren't conquerors, Rax. They're protectors. That's what makes this so difficult. Everything we've been taught about humans, everything the Coalition believes, it's wrong. But try convincing the Council of that. The ship shuddered slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace. Through the view screen, Keltar Prime hung before them like a blue-green jewel, its orbital defense platforms and patrol ships maintaining their eternal vigilance against hegemony incursion. Incoming transmission from Admiral Kane, Nix reported. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the Admiral's stern features. His gray fur was streaked with white, and his eyes held the hard edge of someone who had lost too many battles and too many friends. Captain Rax, you will report to my flagship immediately upon docking. Come alone. Your crew is confined to quarters pending debriefing. Admiral, I need to... You will explain your violation of the Treaty of Titan Station, your unauthorized contact with human forces, and how you expect to avoid court-martial for treason. Kane's voice was ice-cold. Move! The transmission ended, leaving Rax staring at a blank screen. Around him, the familiar sounds of his ship preparing for dock felt somehow ominous. He won't listen, Lynn said quietly. You know he won't. Rax stood, straightening his uniform with movements that had become automatic over decades of service. Maybe not, but I have to try. Too many lives depend on it. As he prepared to leave his ship and face the consequences of his decision, Rax thought about Stone's words. Help us save the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. The species the Coalition feared most might be their only salvation. Lynn, he said, pausing at the door. If this goes badly, if they arrest me or worse, find a way to get this information to someone who will listen. The data Stone gave me is hidden in my personal files, encryption code Delta 77. His sister nodded solemnly. I will, but Rax, what you did was right. Whatever happens next, remember that. As the docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud, Rax walked toward what might be his final command decision. Admiral Kane's flagship, the Righteous Fury, was a monument to Coalition military might. 3 kilometers of armor plating, weapon systems, and the accumulated pride of 1,000 victories. Rax had served aboard her as a junior officer decades ago, but now her corridors felt cold and unwelcoming. The Admiral's ready room hadn't changed in all those years. Sparse, functional, dominated by tactical displays and memorials to fallen comrades. Kane stood with his back to the door, studying star charts that showed hegemony fleet positions along the contested border. 37 years of service, Kane said without turning around. Impeccable record. Commendations for valor, leadership citations, the respect of every officer who served under you. He finally faced Rax, his expression unreadable. And then you throw it all away by violating the most sacred law in Coalition space. Admiral, if you'll allow me to explain... Explain! Kane's voice rose to a roar. You entered human space. You made contact with their military. You exposed coalition vessel capabilities and positions to our greatest potential threat. He slammed his hand on the desk. What possible explanation could justify such treason? Rax straightened, calling upon every lesson in diplomacy and command presence he had ever learned. Because they saved 200 coalition lives, sir. And because they shared intelligence that changes everything. Intelligence? Kane's laugh was bitter. Human lies, you mean? Propaganda designed to make us lower our guard. The Devourers are real, Admiral. They're coming, and we have 18 months to prepare. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kane's expression shifted from anger to something approaching concern, then hardened again into skepticism. The Devourers are ancient history, Captain. Myths and legends used to frighten Academy cadets. Rax slowly reached into his uniform jacket, producing the data Crystal Stone had given him. This contains 7 years of deep space monitoring data, fleet movement analysis, and projected invasion routes. The humans have been tracking them since they first crossed into our galactic arm. Kane stared at the crystal as if it were a live explosive. You brought human intelligence onto a coalition flagship? I brought the key to our survival, sir. For a long moment, the two officers stared at each other across decades of military tradition and the weight of impossible choices. Finally, Kane activated his private communication system. Bridge, this is the Admiral. I'm invoking Security Protocol 7. No one enters or leaves this room without my direct authorization. He took the crystal from Rax and inserted it into his personal analysis system. The displays around the room flickered to life, showing data that made Kane's face grow increasingly pale. Dear gods, he whispered, studying fleet movement patterns that stretched across multiple star systems. These readings, if they're accurate, they are, sir. I've spent 3 days analyzing every detail. The humans haven't been hiding from us, Admiral. They've been preparing for this. Kane pulled up coalition defensive positions, overlaying them with the projected Devourer invasion routes. The tactical picture was devastating. Coalition forces were positioned to fight the hegemony, not an enemy that would come from the galactic rim. Our entire strategic doctrine is wrong, Kane said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every defensive plan, every fleet deployment, we're facing the wrong direction. It gets worse, sir. According to this data, the Devourers don't just destroy civilizations, they consume them. They strip mine entire systems, leaving nothing but empty space. No survivors, no ruins, nothing. Kane studied the consumption patterns, his military mind automatically calculating logistics and capabilities. Fleet strength? Unknown, but estimated in the thousands, possibly tens of thousands. And their ships? Rax highlighted specific technical analyses. They're organic, sir. Living vessels that can adapt and evolve. Our standard tactics won't work against them. But the humans think they can fight this enemy? They've been designing their entire military doctrine around it. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy. They've turned their isolation into the galaxy's greatest military research project. Kane was silent for long minutes, studying the data with the focused attention of a career military officer. Finally, he looked up at Rax with eyes that held a terrible understanding. If this intelligence is accurate, Captain, then the Coalition, as we know it, has less than 2 years to live. Unless we work with the humans, sir. Work with them? Kane's old prejudices warred with the evidence before him. They could be lying. This could all be an elaborate deception to force us into an alliance. To what end, Admiral? They're already ahead of us technologically. If they wanted to conquer Coalition space, they could do it without this elaborate fiction. Kane stood and began pacing, his mind working through implications and possibilities. The Council will never approve it. Too much history, too much fear. They'll claim you were compromised by human psychological warfare. Then we need proof they cannot deny, Rax said. We need someone with enough authority to make this decision unilaterally. Kane stopped pacing and stared at Rax with an expression that might have been admiration or horror. You're talking about going over the Council's head. That's not just career suicide. It's the kind of decision that starts civil wars. Admiral, in 18 months, there might not be a coalition left to have a civil war. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in that moment, suspended between impossible choices in the silence of Kane's ready room. The emergency session of the Coalition High Command convened in the deepest levels of Keltar Prime's military complex, in chambers designed to survive planetary bombardment. 23 senior officers from across Coalition space sat around the oval table, their faces reflecting various degrees of skepticism, anger, and concern. Admiral Kane had spent 4 days carefully selecting who to invite. Officers who valued survival over politics, leaders who had earned their positions through merit rather than connections. It was still a tremendous risk. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels. The information you will receive today must not leave this room until we've reached consensus on how to proceed." General Mars of the Keltar Defense Forces leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, Zhao owning us here without council authorization." "The council doesn't know about this yet," Kane interrupted. "And if we handle this poorly, there may not be a council left to authorize anything." He activated the central holographic display, and the Devourer intelligence filled the chamber. Star charts showing impossible fleet movements, analysis of consumption patterns that stretched across light years, projected timelines that made several officers audibly gasp. "This is human intelligence," Kane continued. "Gathered over 7 years of deep space monitoring from positions we didn't even know existed." Admiral Vec of the Outer Colonies was the first to speak. "Sir, this could be elaborate disinformation. I've had our best analysts verify every data point they could independently confirm." Kane cut her off. "Energy signatures match long-range sensor anomalies our own scouts have reported. Fleet movement patterns correlate with gravitational disturbances our astrophysics division has been tracking for months." Captain Rax stood as Kane gestured for him to address the assembly. Several officers looked at him with open hostility. Word of his treaty violation had spread through military channels despite official secrecy. 18 months ago, our long-range monitoring station at Beacon 7 reported unusual readings from the galactic rim, Rax began. "The report was filed and forgotten because the signatures didn't match any known technology. According to human intelligence, those were advanced scouts." He manipulated the display to show the progression of Devourer movements. "They don't attack randomly. They conduct extensive reconnaissance, mapping defense networks, cataloging resources, identifying strategic targets. The pattern suggests a level of tactical sophistication that rivals our own." General Mars studied the projections with growing alarm. "If these numbers are accurate, we're looking at a force capable of overwhelming any individual coalition member, all within weeks." "Which brings us to the central question," Kane said grimly. "Do we believe this intelligence is genuine? And if so, what do we do about it?" The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Some officers argued for immediate coalition mobilization. Others demanded verification through independent channels. A few suggested the entire situation was human manipulation designed to force an alliance. Admiral Vec raised the question everyone was thinking. Even if this threat is real, why should we trust humans to help us fight it? Their isolation, their refusal to communicate. For all we know, they've made some kind of deal with these Devourers. "Because," Rax answered quietly, "they saved my crew when they could have let us die. Because they shared intelligence they could have kept secret. Because when Commander Stone looked me in the eye and talked about saving the galaxy, I believed him." "You believed him?" General Mars's skepticism was obvious. "Captain, with respect, that's hardly sufficient basis for military alliance." Kane activated another display, showing detailed schematics of human military technology. "This is what they're bringing to the table. Ship designs decades ahead of our best efforts. Weapons systems we can barely understand. Industrial capacity that dwarfs our combined output." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed the implications. The technology displayed wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. "They've been preparing for this specific threat for over 50 years, Kane continued. "Every design choice, every strategic decision, focused on fighting an enemy that consumes worlds. They're not asking us to trust them out of goodwill. They're asking us to recognize that we need each other to survive." Admiral Vec leaned back in her chair. Assuming we accept this intelligence, what exactly are they proposing? Full military alliance, Rax replied. Combined fleets, shared technology, coordinated defense strategies. They want to integrate coalition forces with their own under unified command. Unified command? General Mars laughed bitterly. Under human leadership, no doubt. Actually, no, Kane said, producing another data crystal. They've proposed joint command structure. Coalition officers would retain authority over coalition forces, but all strategic decisions would be made cooperatively. The implications were staggering. After 53 years of separation, humans were proposing not just cooperation, but true integration of military forces. The timeline is critical, Kane emphasized. If we're going to do this, we need to begin immediately. Fleet redeployment, technology transfer, joint training exercises, all of it takes time we may not have. General Mars studied the star charts with the calculating gaze of someone who had fought too many battles. Admiral, if we recommend this course of action to the Council, we're betting everything on human honesty and competence. And if we don't, Kane replied grimly, we're betting everything on our ability to fight the greatest threat in galactic history alone. The Council chamber on Keltar Prime had witnessed countless debates over the centuries, but none quite like this. Representatives from 47 coalition worlds sat in stunned silence as Admiral Kane finished presenting the Devourer intelligence and the proposed human alliance. Chancellor Deer of the Central Worlds was the first to find his voice. You're asking us to abandon 50 years of established policy based on intelligence from our most dangerous potential enemy. I'm asking you to save the coalition, Kane replied evenly. The intelligence has been verified through every independent channel we possess. The threat is real, and it's coming whether we acknowledge it or not. Senator Kai from the Industrial League stood, her voice sharp with suspicion. How convenient that humans appear with this intelligence, just as they propose military alliance. This reeks of manipulation. Captain Rax stepped forward. Senator, I was there. I saw their technology, worked alongside their personnel. These aren't conquerors looking for easy victory. They're survivors preparing for apocalypse. Your objectivity is compromised, Captain, Chancellor Deer said coldly. You've already violated the Treaty of Titan Station. Why should we trust your judgment? The debate continued for hours, with representatives voicing every fear and suspicion that had accumulated over decades of separation. Some argued for independent verification. Others demanded guarantees of coalition sovereignty. A few suggested the entire situation was an elaborate trap. Through it all, the tactical displays showed the inexorable advance of Devourer fleets toward coalition space. It was Senator Tay from the frontier colonies who finally asked the question that mattered. What happens if we say no? Kane activated a new projection showing coalition defensive capabilities against the projected Devourer assault. The results were devastating, world after world falling in a cascade of destruction that swept from the rim toward the core systems. We die, Kane said simply. Not just our governments or our militaries, our entire civilization. The Devourers don't take prisoners or negotiate treaties. They consume everything in their path. Chancellor Deer studied the projections with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades in political survival. And if we accept this alliance? What guarantees do we have that humans won't simply absorb coalition territory once the threat is eliminated? None, Admiral Vex said, surprising everyone by supporting Kane's position. But we have no guarantee of survival without them either. The choice isn't between independence and alliance. It's between alliance and extinction. Senator Kai wasn't finished. The public will never accept it. 50 years of propaganda, of fear. You can't simply tell people that their greatest enemy is now their savior. Then we don't tell them, Kane said quietly. We announce joint military exercises, technology sharing agreements, gradual cooperation. The full truth comes later, when they can see the results. You're talking about deceiving the entire coalition population, Chancellor Deer said, his voice heavy with implications. I'm talking about keeping them alive long enough to understand why it was necessary. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Kane had hoped. 24 votes for the alliance, 20 votes against, 3 abstentions. Barely enough to authorize the most significant policy shift in coalition history. As the representatives filed out, many still arguing among themselves, Kane found himself alone with Rax in the empty chamber. "Think it will work?" Rax asked. Kane studied the tactical displays still showing Devourer fleet movements. "Captain, we're about to bet the survival of our entire civilization on the word of people we've feared for half a century. But looking at these projections, I can't see any alternative." 3 weeks later, the first human ships arrived at Keltar Prime for joint training exercises. The sleek vessels that emerged from hyperspace bore no resemblance to the crude ships of Coalition propaganda. These were the products of 50 years of focused development, every line speaking of deadly purpose. Commander Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Coalition fleet moved into formation alongside human vessels. It was in sight that would have been impossible to imagine months ago. Former enemies preparing to stand together against annihilation. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Kane is requesting permission to come aboard." "Granted. And, Lieutenant, prepare the full briefing. It's time they learned exactly what we're up against." As the shuttle carrying Kane approached, the human flagship, Stone reflected on the irony of the situation. The Treaty of Titan Station had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of cooperation. Now, that same cooperation might be the only thing standing between civilization and the void. The Devourers were still 15 months away, but the real battle, the battle for unity, trust, and survival, had already begun. The treaty had been clear: never enter human-controlled zones. But sometimes, survival required breaking the rules that no longer served their purpose. In the darkness between stars, ancient ships continued their relentless advance toward inhabited space, driven by hunger that had consumed countless worlds before. But for the first time in 50 years, they would face united opposition, the combined will of species that had learned the most important lesson in the galaxy: that enemies can become allies when extinction is the alternative.